Lyndsey, it is amazing to chat with you today. I have heard a little bit about your story, but I know that it's a new story for everyone else. So, just kind of what I know so far is that you had a heart for the nations and for being a missionary, and you started off in Austin, Texas, and you were in a corporate setting, and then after you got married, and I know that your husband, who was then that you were dating, was like, oh, I'm going to see if I can get her to not be a missionary. Or maybe there's a bit more to that, but anyway, that you then ended up in London. So can you tell me a little bit more about that journey of where you were working, and then how did you end up here and doing workplace ministry?
Yeah, definitely. So I did actually move overseas and was just gonna like start my life there. Had, the idea of being a Corey Ten Boom, Elizabeth Elliot, a lot of, like this woman missionary out. But my husband came and proposed. And so I had to come back to America just to get married. And that's actually when I took a job at Google. And I'm happy to say the name of the company because it's been such a big piece of my journey. And so I started working at Google, totally thinking that it was just a great way to make money and basically like fund our future ministry. And it was, we did have a really strong ministry in Austin at the time, working particularly with immigrants and refugees and doing a lot of church planting in homes there. But the way that I got into workplace ministry was the fact that I had a workplace and that I was there more than I was just at home, right? Even though like work-life balance wasn't a big issue for me, you still like 5 days a week, your reality is the work. And so I just couldn't resist this idea that like really one of my mission fields, as long as I'm working at Google, are other Googlers, are other millennials. And so we had been receiving a really great like church planting kind of training. And by training, I mean like how do you start from sharing the gospel all the way through to developing like a little baby church where you've seen fruit for whatever reason. And so all Collin and I did was just take those tools from that training and kind of like convert them to work in our office settings. And so that's how we got into workplace training, is that we had workplaces. And then the crazier thing was just how much fruit we started seeing in our own offices. And at this point, about 2.5 years into my time at Google, they sent me to work on a project. I'd actually started this refugee project within Google because I always felt that part of my ministry was not just sharing the gospel, but also utilizing like what I could do at Google to serve God's kingdom. So there's this refugee project and it went really well, and they brought me to London to kind of expand it here. And that's how I got here. And really, it was in London that the ministry for workplace exploded in a really good way. Because honestly, it's because we met so many believers who had full-time jobs that genuinely wanted to see the kingdom come in their workplace. And not only that, but they were very savvy to the reality in maybe a different way than Americans are, because church is so like prevalent in Texas, but less prevalent in London, that they knew if they were going to see lives changed in their offices, it had to be done in their offices. Like it felt like it was very clear. And so that's kind of how we started our ministry here, is that we were moved here, and it was, yeah, there was a need and a desire.
That's amazing. So I know that you teach people now how to do this. You train and equip people. But if you were to kind of give us a little bit of a sense of how do people actually reach out to their colleagues, is there kind of a simplified answer of how
Yeah.
they do it?
Yeah, totally. I think there has to be a simplified answer, right? So it's honestly, I have to say, like, it's nothing special. We help people walk through daily conversations that they're going to naturally be having. And so one really simple tool, and this is a great way to sum it up, is called Care Through Prayer. And it's essentially arming you with the amazing skill of listening to your coworker when they're talking to you, and picking up on when they say something negative about their life. So like something that's painful or something hard or even something frustrating, annoying, and taking that as your opportunity for an entry point. And the entry point would be like, man, that sounds really tough. Is there any way that I could help you with that? Like, is there, essentially to show them that you care and that you're listening. And then the second thing we practice is actually offering prayer. And so that's like the beginning of everything for us. It's helping people pray on the spot and as not awkwardly as possible for their coworkers in their office. And so we literally have people practicing, not closing their eyes, telling their coworker, hey, I'm not going to do anything weird. I'm just going to, you know what, I'm going to stare over your shoulder and I'm just going to pray. I'm just going to talk to God. So we literally practice these things. So that's how we begin engagement. And that's just an example of the tool, but that's kind of how it goes. And from there, it's the same idea of equipping someone with conversation points and skills for like where to go from there if they seem open and engaged, all the way through to inviting someone to reading the Bible, inviting someone to actually be a follower of Jesus, inviting someone to gather at the office with other brand new believers, and inviting someone to also share their faith. Like it's, the whole thing is basically that simple.
I love that. I love that, especially because it's meeting people where they're at and really loving them. And it's not like forcing an agenda, just like, it's not like going actively looking, trying to get numbers, but it's actually like doing life and being real with people and being there for them. So it sounds amazing.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope the agenda is really is love, because
Yeah.
that's what separates Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. And so how did that then gain momentum? Because you said it's exploded in London.
Yeah. How did it gain momentum? Because it's so simple. I think that there's two answers to that. And one answer is it gained momentum because it was a need, because it was like, yes, it's so simple, but I genuinely needed someone to practice, to literally make me practice this conversation. So I think that's one reason. And then the practical answer is that Christians are pretty networked in London. Definitely more than my experience in Austin. And we're still really involved in faith and tech in America, and there's connection there, but that's just tech. But in London, it's like Christian groups with Goldman Sachs know people with Christian groups in Amazon, know people with Christian groups in Scottish Bank. And so literally it would be that because you might go to church with someone who works somewhere differently. And so then they would just tell their friend at church, oh, we had these people come in and help us. And it was just the stories. It was the stories of fruit. That was what caused things to explode. It was the fruitfulness at work. It was people seeing how open colleagues were to not just the gospel, but to love of Jesus. And then it was like, we just started getting a really large amount of requests of people, hey, come to our lunch break. We're gonna have a 30-minute lunch break. We just train up Christians in like step one, essentially. And then also I do want to mention that Transform Work UK has been vital in our work and ministry, because they are like, their work is connecting all the Christians at work, and they've done a phenomenal job at it. So they've been key to this. Yeah.
You've just mentioned that there's the stories and the testimonies are really what made it spread like wildfire. So are there some certain testimonies or people's lives that you've really seen change that stand out to you?
The most encouraging thing is the group of Christians and how their lives changed from not gathering together to then maybe thinking like, oh, maybe we could do like a prayer group at work, or thinking maybe we could have an email chain of like prayer requests, and then we pray for each other on our own time, to gathering together to learn some simple tools for outreach, and that really motivating unification amongst the Christians, and then to giving up their lunch breaks to then going out on the streets, or in front of St. Paul's Cathedral, there's like the square where like everyone and their mother has lunch during their workday, to going out and literally doing like evangelism on the streets, but by offering prayer. And then just seeing people become very open and saying, like, getting almost no one saying no to prayer in the financial district of central London. And then saying, okay, as a group, now we need to know what to do next. If we're going to gather with these people on lunch breaks, like in a Pret, or if we're seeing more fruit in our offices, around the water cooler, and then having two separate groups. So group meeting in Pret to read the Bible together, and a group meeting in the office to read the Bible together, all new or not yet believers. And so the transition of this group of Christians in the office from like thinking, oh, maybe we could have a prayer chain on email, to then having like a full-on organized outreach. And one day, I mean, there's just like bonkers stories of one day of 12 people saying, yeah, you know what? I really want to know what it looks like to follow Jesus. I mean, like in the first conversation they're having. And these are people that, I mean, we're talking like financial people in central London, not people that you think like are aware of their need, right? For Christ.
Oh, I love that. I love that, because I didn't expect that you would say the Christians, because I'm imagining the people that you're reaching. Yeah. So, but what about like, are there any individual stories of like specific people now that you've, reached out to? Hi, I'm Carrie.
Hi, Carrie. The question. I had some stories coming to mind.
Great, please.
Oh my gosh, lovely.
Someone in our house church, Jessica, who's Italian, lives and works here in London. English is her second language. She works at a kind of like a recruiting firm. But since we've done trainings with her, like trained her in how to see her workplace as her mission field, I mean, she's prayed over probably about 50, 60 different people, and has seen a couple of her coworkers come to faith, but started a Christian group of about 6 people who are out actively sharing in her workplace. But she's got stories of like meeting people right in the moments of need, like right before they get either laid off or some dire situation happen with family. One of her coworkers had a family member get diagnosed with cancer, and she was there every time, able to meet them with prayer, and had to follow up with them with stories of hope that we've trained her in. And I'd seen a couple of those situations where it's like God moments right on time. She was ready to pray for them and invite them into a journey of exploring their faith and how that faith would get them through those situations. But she's had coworkers that have left her firm that she still meets with on a weekly basis that have come to faith that way. And she's got just a really quick and high-powered, like just very fast-paced job and work environment, but is able to capitalize on these opportunities. Just it's been really cool to see her, even with a simple tool set, with English not being her first language, be able to use that as her workplace. But yeah, they've got a growing group of Christians that meet together and all have a focus of seeing their mission field of their workplace reached through the gospel, making disciples there. That's just one that came to mind. But yeah, we had, if you heard from the podcast, Chrissy, our good friend in Silicon Valley, thought she would never pray for a colleague ever. That was not going to happen. Definitely not couth for work. And in her time at her company, she prayed for over 300 people. No one told her no. Just countless fruit coming from her. But those are the couple of stories that came to mind. Did I remember?
I love that. I love that. That's so amazing. And what do you think about like in terms of seeing the supernatural in the workplace?
So I think that when you're offering prayer for people, then you need to be expecting the supernatural, because that's healing, and a lot of things are going to be physical. But we also have an example of someone in our house church. Our people are like, our group is leaders of other little gatherings. And so it's except for some who have come to faith and are now in the church as well. Anyways, sorry. Someone in our house church made it his mission to start every day just in prayer. And one day he felt like God was not releasing him to do anything at all. And so he's like, well, Lord, I've told you I'm going to start the day in prayer. And so if this is what I hear you saying to me, then I'm not even going to turn on my computer. He felt like he wasn't even meant to open up his laptop. Well, his boss comes in and says, like, we've got a child abduction case and we need all hands on deck. Do you happen to like have a day that you could put your work aside and help us with this? And my friend was like, actually, I'm doing nothing today. And so he's like, well, first thing we need to do is track this cell phone because this is the last known identification of this child. So my friend goes to his prayer window, prays, asks God, God gives him an answer, go to this McDonald's on this street and look in the rubbish bin. And what do you think happens? They go to this McDonald's on this street, and in the rubbish bin is the burner phone. And from that phone, they're able to track and find the children that had been lost. And so, of course, that has nothing to do with church planting, but like as far as like this, the supernatural and how it engages with work, that was what was needed that day. And it was only supernatural. There was nothing natural in that. And my friend then shares with his boss, like, I got that from God because I prayed to him, and I pray, and it's like obviously uses it this amazing opportunity to share the gospel. And so in the future, his boss comes back to him and says, we need the praying man. We have another kind of issue, and literally asks my friend to pray. And God again gives him the solution. And now my friend, I mean, the trajectory of his career has like gone to extreme levels, literally because people know that he has a connection to God. So it's just one like really fun example of the supernatural breaking out at work. Lots of healings. I just think obviously if you're going to be praying for healings, for me it was like loads of headaches. My colleagues would consistently have headaches, and I'd be like, man, this is like a consistent one. Let me put my hand on your shoulder, please, because God's going to heal. Like Jesus is going to heal your headache. I had, man, I feel like multiple stories, but just like one of a colleague having like consistent migraines. And you know, if you have a consistent chronic illness, you have very little faith that one prayer is going to do anything, you know, and especially if you're not a person of faith. And so she lets me go into a dark room with her and pray over her headache. And of course it goes away. And she's like not willing to fully admit that Jesus had just done that. But okay, one last story of supernatural is that another colleague of mine, when I asked him if I could pray, he's like, well, you know what? I'm an atheist and I'm really not into that. And I'm like, cool, no worries. Just let me know if you ever like do feel like receiving prayer. Really quickly after that day, he messages me. He's like, actually, my friend is in a coma, and I'm desperate. And so like, yeah, if you have faith, then I think you have the right to pray. And I was like, great, I will. I kid you not, his friend comes out of the coma that hour. And so I'm like, and he's like, Lyndsey, this guy was not going to survive. And I was like, I know, but that's who God is. And so he actually let me like put some time on his calendar, go into a meeting room at Google and share with him like my full testimony of following Jesus. And this guy was like very hardened to Christians. But it's hard to remain that way if you've seen God work in such a supernatural way. So those are some fun stories.
That's what it's all about. That is just completely amazing to hear. So you get all these people that you're meeting in the different workplaces, or not you, but the teams that you are then training and that are interacting with their colleagues. And then how does that go from there? Because from what I've understood is that there's then a lot of churches that get planted out of this. What is kind of that process and how does that work?
Yeah, so the really simple process is we help you with a tool for beginning engagement, which was like that conversation care through prayer tool. And then we have like a helpful transition towards getting to the next step, which would be reading the Bible with them, which is like level one, beginning. I don't even know if I call it discipleship. It's like explorership, you know, and understanding so that they can like understand this husband that they can commit their lives to, right? And then, so that's kind of step two. And then step three is getting to a point where they're actually willing to gather to do that type of Bible reading with other people. And that's where we get to the gold of like actually unifying and gathering and being around other people. Like it's always a goal to be able to do this with other people. And so we give them, and by them, I mean people working in their office, tools, Christians working in their office, tools for leading out groups of new believers or not yet believers, explorers, in how to read the Bible together, but not just read the Bible together. They're also going to, it's got to be more than that, right? To like set goals for how they're going to obey Jesus, or set goals for them, these new believers or not yet believers, praying for their coworkers, and them set, like actual application of life change and following Jesus. And we give the Christians the tools for how to lead those out and kind of a vision for where they're going with that. And then finally, we give them tools for, okay, what does it look like to establish a church that is doing the 9 basic things that we see in Acts 2, the most basic gathering of a church, kind of considering this like the equivalent of like an underground church. And so it's like giving them the tools for leading out like Lord's Supper. What does baptism look like? What is baptism? Praying together, seeing the works of the Holy Spirit together, things like this. So that's like ultimate church gathering goals. And that's also probably the messiest phase. And then the last thing that we give tools for is leadership development, is helping people to basically fully replace us and move forward. So we have tools for kind of each of those sections, if that makes sense.
Wow, that's an amazing spectrum that you guys are, speaking into
We
teaching.
didn't create it. We did not create this. We just, like I said, we just took it from what already existed, like in the missions world, but people were doing in like the bush,
Yeah. And so then because you're teaching some people of how to set up a church, but are you also then like trying to help them to network into existing churches, and how does that look?
Loads. Yeah. That's something that's brilliant about the UK that I can just praise God for, is we have not experienced like competition or combativeness. So like, for example, if we meet someone that wants to follow Jesus and they live in Bermondsey and they're happy to go to an existing church in Bermondsey, then we're going to like help them. We're Christians. We know how to find other Christians. So we're going to connect them with a church in Bermondsey. The reality was that that was like a last step for a lot of new believers, was going to an existing church, or it was totally not feasible because they were on their journey when they went to work, remember? So they might work at Fenchurch Street, but they live in Kingston, right? So like, do they go to a church in Kingston? What if their wife or husband is like totally not into this church thing? And so their journey needs to exist at Fenchurch Street. And so it's like, and it has to exist Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And so then it needs to be something that's created and developed either during their lunch break at Pret or in the office, and they need those tools. But many times, people that are really serious about Jesus want to then bring their family into it. And so they're going to continue meeting like with this lovely new church group at work, but they're also going to find a local expression of church where they live. But it's often 2 separate things because we kind of live in 2 places now.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense with you explaining that, and just kind of like time constraints and potentially family issues. And now, what about your ministry name? If people want to find out more,
you could always look at Transform Work UK, and they have some information like about us on there.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's amazing. I'm so excited. Well, probably because this is my area that I'm super passionate about.